All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Savor Food and Body. I'm your host, Amanda, and today I have with me Emily Marshall. She's an anti-dietitian focusing on helping people to make peace with food and their bodies, and she's coming to us from Seattle, Washington. And we're going to get into a really great conversation today around how do we navigate intuitive eating when you have a chronic illness, particularly one that affects your digestive system. So I know I can speak from experience being trained more in naturopathic medicine when it comes to dietetics, that I see all the time people getting put on some type of restricted diet to manage their GI condition, and that can be really challenging with intuitive eating. So I'm excited to hear what Emily's situation with that has been and her experience with that. So with that, welcome Emily, and if you'd like to introduce yourself even more and tell us a little bit about how you came to do this work, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm happy to be here. So as you said, I'm an anti-diet registered dietitian, and I help people with intuitive eating under a health at every size approach. And, I help people reduce binge eating or emotional eating or overeating. A lot of people, may associate themselves with one term versus another, but, it creates a lot of distress for people. And if they've been on numerous diets throughout their lifetime, they have probably noticed a change in their relationship with food. And that was something that I noticed myself too throughout my career as a dietitian. And, you start to think, what's really going on here? And, does it have to be this way? And, that's just a little insight into how I found intuitive eating. Was I really started to question the traditional weight loss approach, which I was taught in school
Mm-hmm.
as a dietitian. And, that's how I found intuitive eating, was by really just doing like a Google search and seeing, what are the side effects from dieting? What are the side effects from weight loss, and how that affects a person's relationship with food? And then it all kind of came together and clicked for me.
Yeah, so grateful that it did for you. When you, like you said, when you do whether it's a Googling search and then digging into the research too around the side effects. I love how you called it that, the side effects of dieting and restrictive food intake in the name of weight loss. It has so many side effects, both physical and emotional and mental too, and long lasting. I don't know if you see that with your clients, but yeah, a visit with either one of us is not one and done. It takes a lot of unraveling and unpacking to undo those side effects that people have been experiencing.
It really, really does, but it's worth it. It's worth
Yeah,
it. It's not a quick fix, but it's that way for a reason.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So from your own experience, and then maybe even through work with clients too, what does that look like to help someone kind of heal that relationship with food when they have a chronic illness or their body is in chronic health distress, not necessarily from weight, although many of our clients will maybe try to tie it to weight, but even independent of weight. How do you help them navigate, and what's been your own experience with navigating that?
Yeah, so, it's really interesting. I myself was diagnosed with Crohn's disease around the age of 10, so around like middle school age. And what I found among my clients, whether or not they have a chronic illness, that is usually the age that people may have started dieting,
Mhm.
or they start to cultural messages or messages from friends start to get ingrained, and we've already come up with the idea of in our heads, like, what is healthy, what's not healthy, what body type should I have versus what body type shouldn't I have? And that was what I was experiencing was around the age of 10 was, I started picking up on that. And, there was, I think, that pressure for me to be thin, but at the same time, I was diagnosed with Crohn's, and I was already thin. I already had a pretty thin body, but that wasn't perceived by me. And so I also had this idea of like what was healthy food, because I was confused because the doctors kept telling me that I should try to reduce my fiber intake. And they made that recommendation because it was to try to, not make the inflammation in my gut worse. And so, I was totally confused. I was like, well, how am I supposed to eat healthy when they're telling me that I can't have vegetables and I can't have, certain foods and things like that. And so it really restricted my diet. And it created so much confusion for me. And, on top of, being having a diagnosis of Crohn's disease, there's just a lot of uncertainty and lack of control. So it was just a whole sort of like perfect storm, so to speak, for me to develop disordered eating and just, not not be able to trust my body at that point. And I was always trying to, make a change in how I felt. And I think people with chronic illnesses are really susceptible. They're really vulnerable to trying different diets or trying different things to help ease their symptoms. That can be for better or worse, depending on what they're trying. And, it just creates a lot of confusion overall. So that was kind of what I experienced in the very beginning of my diagnosis.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear. And for folks that aren't familiar with Crohn's disease just in general, can you walk us through like what does that mean? And you mentioned the inflammation and removing fiber to decrease inflammation, which again is something that the diet culture would never tell us. It's the more fiber, the better. So walk us through this like a little bit. Like, what is Crohn's? What does that mean to your digestive health?
Yeah, definitely. So Crohn's disease is like a subset. It's a type of inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD for short. So basically, it's an autoimmune response where your immune system is attacking parts of your digestive tract. And for Crohn's disease, it can be anywhere in the digestive tract, so anywhere from the mouth all the way to the anus. And then the other subtype of IBD is ulcerative colitis. With ulcerative colitis, you mainly have the inflammation in just your colon or your large intestine. With this autoimmune response, because it's, related to your immune system, you can have a lot of other symptoms outside of your digestive system. And it's just, it can be inflammation anywhere in the body, whether that's the joints or the skin. So it really can affect your whole body, but it is primarily in the digestive tract. And of course, when you have that inflammation there, you're going to be experiencing really difficult symptoms, whether that's, diarrhea, pain, bloating, discomfort, all of that. And you also are at risk for developing nutrient deficiencies. You feel tired a lot of the time, exhausted. So that is basically an overview. It's mainly controlled by medication, which affects your immune system so that it's not attacking your body. But diet does play a role. So, that was what the doctors told me to do, was to limit my fiber intake and this was actually something I saw a dietitian, not initially, but like a few years down the line, once I had Crohn's for a while, a dietitian explained to me really well why I had to cut out the fiber. And, I never really fully understood that reasoning for that recommendation. But once she told me that the fiber, especially the insoluble fiber, is like a scrubbing brush for the inside of your intestines. And she's like, it's scraping, the inside of your intestines. Like if you had an open wound on your skin, you wouldn't want to rub it. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And it wasn't until that sort of reframe where I had to be like, what is the definition of healthy? What is the definition of healthy food? For me, when I'm in that Crohn's flare where my intestines do have inflammation present, being healthy means I have to, avoid those quote unquote healthy foods. But really, health we know is so much more than a certain food and things like that. So it was totally around, rethinking my idea of what healthy meant.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a client yesterday, and she was talking about how she's prone to low blood pressure. So she has to eat a certain amount of salt or enough salt through the day, or she'll pass out when she tries to stand up. And I said, isn't that interesting how our like general health recommendations are, limit your sodium. In your case, their general health recommendations are get this much fiber in it, and most Americans don't get enough. Like those are the general recommendations we hear, but those general recommendations may not be healthy for someone like her and with low blood pressure, or yourself with the tendency towards inflammation in your gut. And so it's one of the things that I love about practicing intuitive eating and teaching intuitive eating skills to clients, because it puts you back in the driver's seat of what is healthy for your body and able to define what that means for your body. So, but yeah, like you said, such a reframe, when you're in that flare, I'm guessing you probably have to have more white bread and white rice, and limit, like you say, limit produce, or if you have any at all, maybe having it cooked or something that makes it easier on the digestive system. I mean, if you, like I said, if you can have it even at all, and that goes completely against what we're shown on social media and mainstream health. Like we see these huge kale salads and green smoothies, which would probably wreak havoc for you when you're in that space. But that's
Yeah.
what goal is healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a pretty strong staple of eating chicken, rice, maybe some cooked spinach, a lot of chicken noodle soup, super, super bland. And, after a while of that, even though it was like helping my body, I still started to crave, that variety, crave more color and crave more crunch with my food. And so once I was like, better, healthier with my body, done with the flare, and I was able to incorporate those foods again, I really like appreciated them more. And I felt like it was sort of like an intro into intuitive eating for me, because I was able to really listen to my body, listen to my cravings, and find more satisfaction that way.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned like when you first got diagnosed that having the diagnosis kind of tipped off more of a disordered relationship with food. And you mentioned the word control, or feeling out of control. Can you go back to that scenario, explain that a little bit more, what that was like for you, and especially as a kiddo? Like that's it's a fraught time. You're going through puberty at the same time, or starting to, and oh my gosh, yeah. Could you can say more about that? That would be great.
Yeah, I think what I realized in hindsight, of course, was that I was really struggling with my body image, and because there's just that uncertainty. And I think, anyone going through puberty experiences that, because your body goes through these changes which you really don't have control over. And, it can feel like, you got used to having your body be a certain way, and then all of a sudden it changed. And then you have to sort of make some adaptations or things like that for how you move with your body or things like that. So, with having Crohn's disease, and I've had it now for, almost 21 years, we, and I say we as people with IBD, experience many weight fluctuations as we have, when we have our disease, and whether or not we're healthy, or if we're on certain medications, or if we're able to eat, or if we're not able to eat certain foods, our weight just kind of goes all over the place. And that was something that I experienced. Medications can have side effects, like prednisone is a corticosteroid that a lot of people get put on to reduce inflammation, and it causes your cheeks to swell up, and we would commonly call that like chipmunk cheeks. And so that was like a big body image issue for me. And so yeah, it creates that feeling of lack of control. It creates the feeling of lack of uncertainty. If you don't know if a medication is going to work or not, if it's going to help your symptoms. And, turning to food, turning to exercise gives you that sense of control. It's like, I don't know what's going on, but what I do know is I can exercise a certain amount, or I can, control my food in this way. And it initially provided that sense of, security or safety for me. But of course, down the line, I was experiencing worse symptoms because of it, just feeling more tired, feeling, exhausted, inadequate, just really burning myself out because of that, the nature of my relationship with food and exercise. So it wasn't until college age that I decided to walk into a yoga class for the first time. And yoga was something that really helped me to connect back to my body and really ask myself, what does my body need? What does my body want? Versus, how many calories can I burn, or what can I do to try to control my body? So yoga was one of the things that helped me sort of connect back to my body and try to have more self-care in my life to really, pay attention to my energy level, pay attention to how I was feeling, and listen to that feeling.
Yeah, I find that so to be true for most of the people that I work with. Is just some sort of movement as being a way to reconnect with your body. And at the same time, if they've also had the experience of a disordered relationship with movement, that just like we do with food, we kind of have to reframe that relationship and restart that relationship. So whereas movement, like you were describing, like, is a way to control the amount, or the thought is a way to control the amount of calories that we've taken in, or control the anxiety that we're feeling about our bodies, be that the weight fluctuations or just the frustration of the discomfort that you're in, or anything like that. But in the end, it can also lead to the burnout, and it can lead to more physical depletion, because the body's trying to deal with both stresses at the same time, so like intense workouts and intense exercise, and then managing healing a chronic illness too. I'm curious if you ever felt any, when you talk about the body image side of things, and that relating more to how your body looks and your perception of how it looks. But I'm wondering if you also had any challenges with accepting your body in its functionality too, around having the Crohn's and having, I just hear this from other folks that have IBD, like managing the symptoms that can be, like you said, not just GI, but can be elsewhere in your body. And I'm wondering what sense of my body's fighting against me, or how do I live with this body that has so many difficulties? I mean, especially as a young person, when you're going through high school and college and trying to do all the social things that go with that time of our life. And what thoughts came up for you about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an adjustment when for anyone, at any age, because people say that once you're diagnosed, you now have to find a new normal. So you sort of get accustomed to the feelings or symptoms that you have on, maybe a daily basis. But that was definitely something that I struggled with. And I think part of that comes, of course, from our culture, which does not appreciate or, really understand that, you still have worth, even if you are unhealthy or sick. And, we sort of idolize or prize people for being quote unquote healthy and looking healthy. And the thing about Crohn's disease is it's also typically called an invisible illness because it's happening all on the inside for most people. So a person can look healthy on the outside, but you just wouldn't really know the symptoms or feelings that they're experiencing going on, without asking them. So it's totally just affects, I think, a person's um, understanding of their body and appreciation or respect for their body, because we have those messages going on that, just totally idolize healthy people. And then, you sort of have to come to terms with the fact that every day you're not going to be energized. And, depending on the severity of your disease, you're going to be in the bathroom for a long time, most days. And that, of course, affects your ability to be productive at work or in your relationships, or home life or whatnot. So, you do have to come to terms with that, learn to appreciate things, even the littlest things for what you can still do with your body, and just recognize, that your body may not be working the way that it's supposed to work, but it's doing the best that it can to help you survive and function. And so I really had to learn to take a step back, because I'm that perfectionist personality type. And, I want to get things done and I want to do things efficiently, but sometimes my body just doesn't want to do what my mind wants it to do. So I have to take a step back, reevaluate, let myself rest more when I need it. And that really helps me, when I'm able to see rest as just as important as being productive or energized,
Yeah, it's in a way, laying a whole foundation for continual practice in self-compassion. And that anytime you have a flare, or symptoms are slightly off, or you're, even as you become more in tune to what's going on with your body, like noticing the little red flags that pop up, like, oh, gonna need more compassion today, gonna need a little bit more grace today, and do the best I can, and know that it's enough, and know that I'm enough. I wanted to highlight what you said around worth and health. And not only are we fed these messages of what is the ideal image of health, but just the how much worth we put on health in general, with the assumption that anyone and everyone can achieve the optimal health. And that's not necessarily true, because we have all kinds of genetic components that come into play. We have social justice issues and all of that. And you and I have talked before about just the foundation of health at every size, and the determinants, social determinants of health, and how that relates to health. And so, just like we were talking about with food, having your own definition of healthy eating, it's almost coming up with your own definition of what is health for you, like generalized health for you, and what does your body need to honor the illness, to honor what you need to take care of your body in that moment. And no matter what that is, you're still worthy as a person, as a human being, and you deserve to have the space and hopefully the resources to get what you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah. And healthcare is just so expensive in our country, and having IBD is an expensive disease, let me tell you. And I grew up with a lot of privilege. So of course that affected, my outcomes for how my disease was managed. I had really good care, access to care, healthcare. So yeah, absolutely. That plays a huge role in, I think, how people are able to be healthy, and what health looks like for them too.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to circle back to the food part too. And you mentioned that as you were kind of sitting with your diagnosis, maybe I want to say quote unquote getting used to the diagnosis initially as a kiddo, and I'm wondering if you mentioned that it helped you become more of an intuitive eater. And I'm wondering if you can explain what that process was like for you, and whether it's related to satisfaction. You touched on that just a little bit, but more in depth in satisfaction, or even hunger and fullness. Like, how does having this condition affect hunger and fullness and your ability to get satisfaction?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to answer there. Like, for sure, it definitely impacts your hunger and fullness, and especially your energy level too. So different medications can of course affect your appetite. Some medications will increase your appetite, which can actually be really good for people with IBD, especially if they have been malnourished, or weren't able to eat for a period of time. So but of course, people can then become self-conscious of that. I mentioned the weight fluctuations, and so that's just one factor. But the fatigue is another factor, which so many people with IBD experience, is just fatigue that happens all the time, and it makes you really tired from even the simplest of things. You could be getting ready in the morning, and you're showering, brushing your teeth, getting dressed and all that. And then by the time you're done getting ready in the morning, you're like, okay, I need to take a nap. You need to lay down. And so that just makes food preparation, thinking about food, shopping for food, that much more tiring and challenging. And that was something that I had to learn for myself, was how to make it easier on myself. Over time, I had to find a different structure for myself. I had to sort of plan around the days that I would have more energy, and to be able to go food shopping and prepare food and whatnot. I always typically now, cook once, eat twice. So I'm not trying to cook every day. I try to, cook only a certain amount to make it easier on myself, because it's exhausting for anyone, but it's exhausting, especially for people with chronic illness. But yeah, and there was something else I wanted to mention, but it left my mind. Yeah, just I think the exhaustion is a huge part of that for sure.
And your hunger and fullness cues, how is that? How can the illness affect those or make it different? Like when you're in a flare versus
Mm.
not in the flare.
Yeah, it is tricky. I think if people are really sick, they're probably not going to have an appetite. I myself, actually, I've been in remission for a few years now, so I'm pretty well managed with my symptoms, and my appetite and fullness level has returned to pretty much normal. But yeah, I mean, of course, you have to factor in disordered eating too. We know that that is going to affect a person's appetite and fullness. And then it just popped into my head what I wanted to mention before was about intuitive eating. You know, there are a few different diets out there, restrictive diets that are recommended for people with IBD, as well as people for IBS. And I remember hearing about those diets from my doctors or from maybe different dietitians. And I think because I had already been restricted in my disordered relationship with food, but also from being sick and having to limit fiber, there was just sort of this gut instinct in me that was like, no way, you know, I do not want to ever think about going on a restrictive diet again, even if it meant potentially that my symptoms might improve a little bit. And so that is something that I've recognized is just, there's just this strong reaction to thinking about like an elimination diet or a specific diet to manage symptoms. You know, I would rather manage my symptoms in ways that do not involve food restriction. And yeah, I think that was just something that, you know, I was like, no way is my body going to go through that again. Because it was just mentally straining. It was, you know, it made everyday life difficult to have to navigate having those food restrictions in restaurants or, you know, dating, going traveling, places like that. It just wasn't something that I wanted to deal with, and it wasn't something that I would be happy with mentally either.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I've had a number of clients come through my office too of they have some sort of symptoms, whether it's full-blown diagnosed IBD or even just IBS, which can sometimes feel like a bit of a catch-all diagnosis. And they'll get recommended either from their GI doc, or if they work with a naturopath, they'll get recommended some of those diets too. And because I'm the type of dietitian that we are, like, that's always kind of a red flag, and to check in with the person and say, okay, well, I can help you with that, but let's make sure we understand what are the full implications of going down a diet like that. What is the social fallout of that? What is the difficulty around access to food? You know, some of those diets, they may significantly limit foods that are more easily to find or are cheaper price point. You know, just think of gluten free for an example. Like gluten free alternatives are not the same price as their regular conventional you know, crackers and breads and whatever. And so, like bringing that all into context for someone, saying, okay, obviously don't want your body in pain or discomfort. So what are some maybe more intuitive ways that we can mitigate what foods trigger, maybe some don't? Because I wonder what your experience is like with that too. I found with some clients, we'll look at one of those elimination diets and they're like, well, no, that food, that's never bothered me. Why would I take that out? And so we can go through that food list, and there can be a good handful, if not more, foods that they go, yeah, that doesn't bother me. Why would I limit that? What was your experience like with obviously turning down the elimination diets, but then what was your experience like from that more intuitive place of how to make food choices to help manage your symptoms on your own terms? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? Like elimination diets, as with like most diets, are giving you those external rules.
Mhm.
And, the point with them, I'm not saying all elimination diets are bad. They may work for some people, because if you do them well, you should try to reintroduce foods over time and try to listen to your body. But that was sort of what I did anyways through intuitive eating was, I learned I'm a little bit lactose intolerant. So, I would drink some milk and I kept it going throughout the week, realized I wasn't really feeling my best. And through listening to my body, I was able to reduce that food without feeling restricted or constrained, because it was a more like self care approach to reducing that food. It was like, well, I don't want to feel that way all the time. I might still have it some of the time, but I'm okay. So it was like a conscious choice that I made to reduce it, that felt okay to me at the time. And that may be the case for some foods versus other foods. Other foods may make me not feel so good, but I still may want to eat them. And that's up to me. That's my decision for my body. And I think one of the things that being sick and having Crohn's disease really helped me understand was that the patient truly is the expert. And I think it helped me really respect a patient's boundaries, because what I've seen among practitioners that I've seen, is that they come at it from a really expert level point of view, where they're like, well, do this diet or do this medication, it will work for you. But they haven't actually asked the patient's opinion or respected the patient's lifestyle for whatever lifestyle they want to live, not recognizing that the patient really should be part of that decision making process, deciding what's right for them or what's going to work for them or what they're ready for.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so well said, that patient-centered care. And been at clinics, been at hospitals where I see marketing materials that will speak that language around patient-centered care. But I've either seen it with family members or myself going, wait a minute, there's still like an expert um, top-down type presentation of what's going on. And I think too, like, what you were describing to me as you were describing it, what I was hearing is this balance between the principles of body respect and gentle nutrition. And I'll often get with clients, maybe they have, whether it's a GI issue or what's coming up in my practice a lot now is blood sugar stuff, higher blood sugar levels, maybe higher cholesterol, since I'm dealing primarily with middle-aged women, and those numbers just tend to creep up as we get older. And so this idea of maybe someone doesn't want to be doing restriction anymore. They don't want to be following the diet, maybe because they've had that really rocky relationship with food in the past, and they've worked so hard to heal that relationship with food. But now there's this medical piece that's come up, that how do we navigate that without creating restriction mentality again, and having them walk that balance, just as you were kind of describing around, well, I don't want to, eat this food continuously if it causes me discomfort. But it's okay if there are times, like social events, whatever, and I still enjoy the food, that I will have the food. And that's okay. And I know that I might have some mild discomfort because I have it once in a while, but I'm willing to do that. And that's okay. That's respecting the body's need to be part of connection with people, and also just having flexibility and variety when it comes to food. And so I've been having those conversations a lot more recently around, obviously, these people are managing their metabolic health around cholesterol and blood sugar. How do we do that without turning back towards that restriction and turning more inward to what's this feel like in your body when you eat a certain way or move your body in a certain way. So yeah, I like how you described that.
Yeah, I think intuitive eating is so great because it teaches us body autonomy, and we can make those decisions based off of gentle nutrition or self-care or our emotions, and just have an actual choice for ourselves about what we want to do with our bodies. How do we want to move our bodies? How do we want to eat food for our bodies? And it's really just so empowering to have that autonomy, especially when in other areas of your life you may feel like you don't have that autonomy. And dieting sort of gives us that false sense of autonomy, but intuitive eating, because it comes from that internal sense, it's the true sense of autonomy.
Yes, that's so well said. And whether that's the autonomy in managing your care as you interact with providers, or it's the autonomy of what you choose to eat and how you choose to move your body and take care of your body is so important. It's that foundation, that the glue that kind of holds intuitive eating together.
Yeah, absolutely. So grateful that I found intuitive eating.
Yeah, it sounds like it's helped on a lot of different levels for you. And it's wonderful to hear that you're in remission. I'm surfacely familiar with IBD, from school and a few clients here and there, but I haven't had a direct conversation with someone about, again, their lived experience, which is going to be different for everybody. And so I wasn't sure if Crohn's was one of the ones that can go into remission, and hopefully not get triggered again for you. But if it does, you know how to take care of yourself. Yeah. So tell us what you're working on these days, and if there's anything that you'd like to share with our audience and where they can find you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I am on most social media platforms. So I'm most active on Instagram. People can find me there, truebeing_RD. I also have a TikTok as well, where I make some videos on TikTok, and a YouTube page as well. So truebeing_RD is, pretty much my username on all those different platforms. People can find me there. And, my website, truebeingRD.com, people can learn a little bit more about me and how I help clients.
Great. That's fantastic. And are you seeing people in person yet or virtually?
Just virtually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm holding on to the virtual thing. Super. Okay, I will put links to those in the show notes that will live both on the Alpine Nutrition blog and in the YouTube link, and I'll see about linking stuff in Facebook as well. So I'm so grateful you were able to come on and share your experience today. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of folks that are managing any kind of chronic illness, and how does that tie into intuitive eating. I don't think we have these conversations enough around how do we mitigate someone's health experience with intuitive eating to it looks more like freedom with eating donuts. That's what intuitive eating can come across a lot as, but it's got a lot more nuance to that. So I'm grateful for you sharing your experience today.
Yes, well, happy to be here. Thanks again, Amanda.
You're welcome.